we want to begin our State of Michigan budget town hall meeting. We are honored tonight to have our 38th District Representative, Representative Joy Andrews. We also have with us the New Buffalo City Manager and former City Manager, Benton Harbor, Darwin Watson. We also have our City Manager, Alex Little, Commissioner at Large Isom, Mayor Pro Tem Dwayne Seats, our First Ward Commissioner Henderson. We are also graced with our Board of Education President, Mrs. Robinson. And we make those announcements or acknowledgments because the state budget will impact everything. And the most important VIPs with us are you in the audience, because it is the voter and the Michigander that this budget hopefully will pass on time, and we will be the greatest beneficiaries. So with that being said, I want to yield to our State Representative, Joy Andrews.
You have to hold it to, all right, cool. Thank you first off for hosting us here today in the city. It's a great venue to have this this being done at, and appropriate, I think, because the state budget impacts pretty much everything we do at the local level here. Public safety, road funding, public health, all of it runs through the state budget. And interesting times we live in. The federal budget is also late, and I think sometimes what's going on here in the state gets lost in that conversation about what's going on at the federal level. But Michigan budget last year was north of $80 billion. We don't have the final numbers on this year's budget yet, but we expect something similarly sized. So Michigan has one of the larger budgets in the country, 10th largest state, right? So we have a lot of responsibility to get this right, and I'm very proud of the budgets that we did the last 2 years during my first term. We were able to make a lot of really historic investments, whether it was school meals, breakfast and lunches. We put millions into that program to make sure no kids in the state went hungry. Expanded revenue sharing and public safety funding, money into public health, mental health. Just a host of great programs during the trifecta during the first term. And a lot of this year with divided government has been a different animal, as I think everybody can imagine. Things happen at a different pace when government's divided. We're in a minority in the House this year. But a lot of our focus has been on protecting those investments and making sure that we're not going backwards. You may have seen some news about a month or so ago when the House Republicans dropped their proposed budget 3 months late. But that was when they dropped their proposed budget. And it was a budget that represented something like $5 billion in cuts from last year's budget. Over $6 billion in differences from the Senate's proposed budget, which they passed back in March, early. So, apropos of nothing. But I think we haven't seen the final text of this budget, so I want to be clear that a lot of this is we've had conversations about conceptually what is being funded, what where everything is being held at. We haven't seen the final dollars and cents yet, but the word from the governor, our appropriations folks in the House and the Senate, and the Senate Majority Leader, as well as the House Speaker, is that we're going to be able to maintain virtually all of those programs. It sounds like the budget is going to be mostly flat. That includes the education bill budget not seeing the sort of cuts that were proposed, again, by the House Republicans earlier this year. So I don't know that we're going to see expansions of programs this year, but given the state of affairs that we're in, I think no cuts is a win. Us being able to hold the funding that we've made intact, that is a big win. As a sort of secondary update, if any of you have been reading the news over the last few days, Thursday there were some pretty big votes in Lansing that kind of initiated us getting this budget done, hopefully by our deadline, which is October 1st, which for those keeping track, is really soon, really, really soon. We passed some revenue bills last Thursday, and these were really important because the federal budget, the continuing resolution that is referred to as the Big Beautiful Bill, but which you will not hear me refer to as such because it is not beautiful, but it is big. That bill blew about $1 billion hole in the state budget. From Medicaid alone by not matching reimbursements. Michigan's a Medicaid expansion state, and so that was done over 10 years ago. Notably, it was Republicans who expanded Medicaid in Michigan at the time, so you would think bipartisan, but the feds are pulling back on some of the reimbursements, which put about $1 billion burden on us to fill in to keep Medicaid intact. On top of that, the feds reduced and basically ended their funding for school meals, so that was another thing we needed to be able to fill in. And a number of other issues. The federal corporate tax cuts also would have put about a $500 million hole in our funding. So the bills that moved this last Thursday basically addressed all of those concerns. They all passed overwhelmingly bipartisan. So we did what's referred to as decoupling on our business taxes, which basically means for the next few years, Michigan won't be adopting the corporate cuts that the feds put in place. So that $500 million that we would have gotten hit with, we're not getting hit with. It's going to be held flat. To be clear, that's not a tax increase. It's just we're not adopting the tax cut. So we're going to hold our revenue neutral on the corporate business side. We also filled in the Medicaid hole, the $1 billion. We made some moves to move money around and basically said we're not going to wait for the feds to figure out what they're giving us. We're going to put a system into place that preempts that. So that should be held intact. We did adopt the tax breaks on tips, overtime, and Social Security for the next 3 years. Those were big priorities for the federal Republicans and the state Republicans as well. So the trade on not doing the business tax cuts is that we took those tax cuts, which were a much smaller budget impact. The final bill was a road funding bill and revenue bill that creates a 24% wholesale excise tax on marijuana. I will note that was the one bill that I had an issue with personally. The bill creates the revenue to hold our road funding from reaching the funding cliff that we were approaching. We needed to find about $2 billion as a minimum in road funding this year. More would have been better in order to continue fixing the roads at the pace that we have been. The governor took bonds out in 2020 when she was unable to get her funding proposals through for 2 years, and those bonds end next year. And so if we don't find a way to fund roads, if we haven't found a way to fund roads, what basically happens is a lot of the companies that do this work are going to move equipment and manpower out of state to states like Ohio and Indiana where they do adequately fund road work. So this has been a big deal. Roads, getting the road package funded. My issue is that I think instead of tackling some more sustainable revenue streams because they would have been less popular or would have gotten pushback from Lansing stakeholder types, we went with a marijuana wholesale tax that I don't know will actually result in the funding levels that we need. There's still a lot of work being done on this, and I actually was on a phone call right before I got in here today that we're going to keep doing some work on this with the Senate to try to get it right. But that was the one bill I have some concerns about, and I'm worried that the revenue isn't going to be what they think it is as the marijuana industry contracts under the weight of a new tax. California actually had to pull back on their tax this year because the black market kick-started because their tax got too high. And the last thing we want is the marijuana drug trade coming back because we're taxing retail too high. So I think more to come on that, hopefully, in the future. But the moral of the story is all of those passed, so the revenue's held neutral, which sets us up, hopefully, to vote on a budget deal tomorrow, hopefully before midnight. But at the very least, in the next couple of days to avert a shutdown and any kind of crisis on that front. So that is, the bulk of the update that I have there.
Can you just discuss some of the kitchen table issues that hopefully won't get lost in translation or lost in the sauce of the final down to the minute negotiations?
Do you have any programs in mind directly?
you could talk about maybe Medicaid, SNAP benefits, school lunches,
Yeah.
as well as, I know that when I met with Senator Nesbitt, he talked about the possibility of the money coming, but school districts having to decide, do I pay for tutoring or do we pay for free lunches?
Yeah, so the original Republican House budget eliminated, in their school aid budget, eliminated what's called categorical funding. For those that don't know, the categoricals are basically, aside from the per pupil money that every district gets, there's these kind of categoricals where a school district can apply for that money or qualify for that money. And so if you're an at-risk school district, that's a category. Mental health funding, school meals, transportation, there's a whole host of them. The Republican budget basically took all that money and dumped it into the general fund. And so what that let them do is say that they were giving a gigantic per pupil increase to every school. The issue is that the reality is that that would not have been a revenue boost for most school districts. For instance, Benton Harbor schools, by losing at-risk funding as a categorical that they can get extra money from, losing the mental health funding support while enrollment is declining, means that boosting per pupil is sort of like chasing a sliding target, where the categoricals are supposed to exist to stabilize the funding. And so Benton Harbor would have got hit pretty hard without the categoricals being there. On the flip side of that, interestingly, we also heard from New Buffalo schools and Saugatuck schools in our district, which are out of formula districts because the property values are so high. And they told us that because they're out of formula, they don't receive the per pupil money in the same way that other school districts do, which means they also rely on the categoricals for part of their funding. So I said that, the really fascinating thing is the Republicans figured out how to make a budget that hurt both the poorest school districts and the wealthiest school districts in the state somehow at the same time. What I understand, having talked with the governor last week and updates from her team since then, is it sounds like that is not what's going to happen. The categoricals are going to remain intact. I believe, again, without having seen dollars and cents, that what we're going to see from the school aid budget, which might actually be the first thing we vote on tomorrow, honestly. I think the school aid budget is mostly agreed upon. I think we're going to see basically a small increase in the per pupil amount, maybe $100, $200 per pupil, real small increase there. School meals, the governor has assured me, are being held intact, and that we are not going to be defunding the school meal program. And basically the rest of the education budget is going to be held neutral from last year. So we're not expecting big increases, but we're not expecting losses. SNAP, I've been told, is being held intact. And I don't believe we're adopting any of the work requirements at this time. If the feds implement the work requirements, that's a different story. I mean, we still have to do what the feds say. But as far as I know, we're not mirroring that. Could find out something different tomorrow, but as far as I know right now, we're not. And Medicaid is being held intact. Like I said earlier, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we hold our reimbursements in check, even if the feds stop sending us the money. That's very, very important, especially for our rural hospitals where, and this is an important point if I can just, segue for a quick second. When people think Medicaid, they often think of a particular type of person. And you all know what I'm talking about because it's a pretty racially charged image usually of who they're thinking about. Rural parts of this state are overwhelmingly on Medicaid. Like rural white people are high recipients of Medicaid. And I think that it gets lost in this conversation that 50% of the births in Michigan are Medicaid births. 50% of the kids born in Michigan are born on Medicaid. So this is a widespread problem in our state. I mean, poverty is not unique to any one community. And so the losses that we could have taken on the Medicaid front would have been devastating across the board. And those rural hospitals where a lot of these Medicaid births are happening rely on Medicaid to keep them afloat. If we would have lost some of this Medicaid funding, we stood to lose up to, I think, it was between 6 and 9 rural hospitals would have closed immediately. We already have a hospital in the UP that announced a month ago that they're closing their maternity ward, again, because overwhelmingly Medicaid births and they can't maintain anymore. So now you have mothers in that area that are going to have to travel hours to get to another hospital to get maternity care. And so Medicaid underpins our healthcare system in a way that I just don't think people talk about enough. And if you take that foundational block away, Hospitals have to start charging more for care, which means insurance companies have to pass those costs on to the insured in the form of deductible and premium increases, which means people don't go to get health care because they can't afford to pay those premiums and deductibles, which means they show up at the hospital sicker, which then means care costs more money. And you can see how this kind of creates a death cycle. And the unfortunate thing is the federal government has sort of pushed this ball down the slope now and has started this death cycle happening. We're going to do our best to hold the line in Michigan as long as we can, but it is a serious problem that we could be staring down in the years to come.
So, the damn roads.
Can we stay on the medical thing just for a second?
Well, we're going to give the public an opportunity, but I just have some things from the Whitmer administration here that I shared with the representative that we want to just go over before we open it up. Is that all right? So the damn roads. Can you talk about, I know that was something that I think both sides agreed. You helped to push it from the House, but how is that going to impact local jobs and protect Michiganders from flighting to, as you mentioned, Indiana, Ohio?
Yeah, this one was a really important one. So initially, the House Republicans put a plan for road funding on the floor this spring. There was about 5 of us on the Democratic side, myself included, that voted for that bill to move it to the Senate. Not a perfect bill, I will say at the outset. Their bill basically called for filling in the $3 billion in revenue entirely on budget cuts. Not really possible, honestly. I know, I said we have an $80 billion budget, but over half that budget is education, and then you add another $20 million on for DHHS, and you start to run out of money really quickly. I mean, the discretionary, quote unquote, portion of our budget is not actually all that big. You're talking maybe $30 billion at most. And so it's pretty hard to find that level of cuts. But the important thing to me was that we needed to start this conversation in earnest. The governor's been saying fix the damn roads for 6 years now, almost 7 years now. And the legislature has just not been willing to do the hard thing and fund this. And in part because there's no way to do it without raising taxes. There just isn't. And, no politician wants to raise taxes. It's obviously not popular. And the economy's not great right now, so you don't want to burden people if you can avoid it. But the reality is we have underfunded our roads in this state for decades. I mean, 30, 40 years we've been underfunding road construction, and that can has been kicked down the road, and now it's sitting in front of us, and it's dire. I mean, before the governor took the bonds out, over 50% of the roads in the state were in poor or critical condition. Now we're at a point where 60% of the roads are in good or fair condition, so we've turned the corner. But if we don't, MDOT estimated that if we don't get road funding secured now, it'll only take 3 to 5 years before we're back under 50% again, because of course winters here are bad and they're bad on the roads, and we're an auto state. We do a lot of shipping, heavy shipping, and it's hard on the roads. So we wanted to get that negotiation started. Unfortunately, the Senate really had no desire to prioritize roads this year. The Senate, this is my own party, the Senate Dems just really were not interested in doing road funding this year. So it was sort of a collaboration between the governor and the House that was pushing this forward. I was part of a work group in the House that was working on the funding question. How do we find the revenue? Because even while the speaker was saying, we're going to do this on cuts, no new revenue, behind closed doors they were like, yeah, we know we're going to have to do some revenue, right? So we knew that was going to be on us to come up with the revenue ideas. So we came up with a list of about 10 good revenue items. Heavy trucking, diesel, maybe a small gas tax, package delivery, digital advertising, billboards, rental cars, surface parking lots, and marijuana. I think that's all 10. Was the list of, and we weren't going to do all of those, mind you. This wasn't like we're doing 10 taxes. This was like, here are 10 revenue options. Let's figure out from this list how we can make road funding work in combination with, some cuts and some new revenue and that sort of stuff. So the frustrating thing is that basically every industry except marijuana immediately was like, don't tax us. No. And marijuana was like, we know we've been getting away with a low tax rate. We're willing to accept a higher tax rate. We need some reg reform, and they wanted to work together. So I was working with them on trying to put that together. Unfortunately, in the meantime, the Senate Majority Leader said she refused to do a package delivery tax. That would have been a big revenue generator, as you can imagine, with how many Amazon deliveries we see. And I'll note that Amazon vehicles are electric, so they don't pay the gas tax. So a delivery fee on Amazon actually, makes a lot of sense as a user fee. Senate Majority Leader didn't like that one. Digital advertising, I think South Carolina tried. They're wrapped up in court on it, so nobody wanted to go down that road until that court case is resolved. Heavy trucking looked like it was going to make it, died over the weekend, basically. Unfortunately, no one's got the spine to do the gas and diesel tax like we really need to, because it's unpopular. So it left us with marijuana, and we ended up with the 24% wholesale tax, like I said, which I don't think is going to actually work out. So I do think we're going to be back talking about road funding pretty quickly after this budget passes. But at least we're hopefully averting the cliff for now. So it's sort of a live to fight another day situation where we're hitting $2 billion. We really need to hit three and a half if we're going to be serious about this. But we've at least made progress on roads that hasn't been made in like 40 years.
So I've been getting some, obviously, the marijuana funding would impact the local because the share comes through the state to the county to the municipalities. And from what I'm hearing from that industry is that if the 24% tax is levied, it would make the cannabis industry, for lack of a better example, go up in smoke. But on another note, talking with the governor, at one point I was sharing with her that I was right at the point of almost finishing reading The Art of the Deal. And she shared with me that she had read it before. And that brings me to, what type of deals, what type of, elbows, if any, how have the negotiations evolved to where she was able to bring both sides to the table, where we don't have a deal just yet, but we have some agreements that are delicate, but we're, for all intents and purposes, looking to see a balanced budget by the 1st of October.
Yeah, this is really the how the sausage gets made question, right? So this was really interesting. This is my third year, so not to say that I've seen a whole bunch of budgets or anything, but for people who have been there a long time, they told us this was a really weird negotiation, really unusual. And last 2 years we were negotiating with ourselves, right? It was Democratic trifecta. Not to say that was easy by any means. It actually, in some ways, can be harder when you're negotiating with people that you agree with in principle, because suddenly you want to do all these great things, but now you're looking at how much money you have, and it's like not everybody's program can make it, and things end up on the cutting room floor that everybody likes, right? So that was a hard thing last term. This term, the oddity was that the House basically stayed completely out of it, the House Republicans, until virtually a month ago. So Michigan has a statute that requires, really with no penalty, but requires the legislature to have a budget done by July 1st. That was put in place in 2019 when the legislature came close to a shutdown, because schools and local governments often begin their fiscal planning in the summer and fall, and if they don't have any idea how much money they're getting, it makes it hard to plan a budget if you don't know what your income is for a year, right? And so, last 2 years we were done by July 1st, no problem. This year the Senate introduced and passed their initial budget proposal in March, which is pretty much typical. It's about what we did when we were there. The Republicans did nothing. Just no proposals. They didn't drop their education budget until late June, which was a nightmare, and nothing on the main general funding budget until September, late August, early September. And that was that $5 billion in cuts budget that was universally, even like Republican groups in Lansing were like, wait, the Hospital Association, which isn't usually democratically aligned, was like calling for heads on a platter. So it wasn't a good budget, but they basically waited until a month before the October 1st hard line. Our fiscal year starts October 1st. So if we don't have a budget done on October 1st, we start the shutdown process. Money stops getting distributed. People stop being able to get paid for work. It's a bad thing. And so the negotiations really didn't get to even start until a month ago, which means that it's been under the gun this whole time. And that's made a lot of us really nervous, honestly, because, we found out last week, early last week, that a deal had been made between the Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker, and the Governor on the new revenue sources and the framework of a budget. But we haven't gotten to see this deal yet. We've been kind of, as I've explained some of the the details, we've gotten a summary, and the summary sounds good-ish, but as I keep telling everybody from the media on down, the devil's in the details on all this. You can tell me that we're funding local roads and public safety, but if you end up cutting revenue sharing and then replacing that with roads and public safety, we haven't actually done anything, right? So there's a lot of detail work that we really need to see here. But I really think part of the problem in all this, honestly, there's some blame to go around for the Senate not being willing to play on roads, which was a big priority. But the Speaker just was unwilling to even have negotiations outside of his press conferences, basically, for months at a time. And I think what it comes down to is that he has a very divided caucus. They only have a 4-seat majority. It's very thin, but they've got a lot of these right-wing MAGA types in their caucus, probably 12, 15 of them. And I really think that the struggle he had is that generally a majority wants to pass their first initial budget proposal as kind of like a partisan budget, right? Like you want to reflect your values as the majority party in the budget. He didn't have the ability to do that because he had members in his own caucus that wanted, $5 billion in cuts wasn't enough. They wanted more, the school budget, when we were there late in June, initially they were cutting all the funding at one point for U of M and MSU because that's what some of the right wing wanted to do, So I think he was in a real bind, and the only thing he could do was kick the ball down the road until the pressure got so high that he could go to his people and say, do or die, you got to vote for it, right? But unfortunately, that puts us in the same position now where we're under the gun and we're trying to make sure that this is going to be a good budget. And, we're hours basically away from hitting the shutdown line, and no one wants to cross it if we can help it.
Thank you. And to Matt, Speaker Hall's credit, I was told by a high-ranking Republican, he said that he thought that if it were Matt Hall and Governor Whitmer in the room, they could make a deal. But I will digress. Education we do have, and I want to recognize our superintendent of Benton Harbor Area Schools, Dr. Griffin. She's with us. Are there any questions on the education side that you would like to, you or President Robinson, to pitch to our representative? You have to push for the microphone too.
So I'm not sure if you have the answer to my question because it sounds like those minute details of the education budget you've not yet seen. Okay, so what were the things that were extremely important to you? I know school lunches and things like that. Have you all been promised that those, it sounds like they're going to stay neutral from last year, so no cuts but no increases?
The governor told me to my face that school breakfast and lunches were being held intact. So I'm hoping she wasn't lying to me. I don't think she was lying to me. I think school breakfast and lunches are going to be held. That was, I think, one of the biggest things we were fighting for on the House side, myself included, was that we didn't want that program to be walked back. The categoricals was a big deal too. I've been told that the categoricals are staying in place. Like I said, I think most of us consider a relatively flat budget a win this year, just given where we started and what was being presented by the House. But I have been led to believe that there should be at least a small per pupil increase in the budget, but I don't think we're going to see big expansions, maybe even small expansions of most of the other programming in the budget. The ed budget is one of the few budgets that grows on its own, though. As you know, it's the formulas that fund it are locked. So the money that's there is the money that's there. One of the struggles we had is that the Republicans wanted to basically hold like $1 billion in revenue just in the balance sheet and not spend it on the ed side. And there was some attempts to move things between higher ed and K-12, which is a tactic they used to pull for a long time to move money in education around. So I'm really interested to see what the higher education budget looks like, because I think that's going to tell us a story about what is happening with the education budget all around. But the expectation is that we're not going to see cuts at the very least. We're at least going to maintain levels.
Is the same thing expected for tutoring?
I don't know about that one in particular. I'll definitely try to remember to check on that when we actually have some details, hopefully tomorrow, and I'll try to let you know what it looks like for tutoring. But I think my expectation is that we're not going to see cuts in the ed budget. The number I was told for the overall budget was maybe something like $400 million was going to get cut from various parts of the main budget. I think a lot of that's probably going to end up being in like economic development and some like unfilled job positions. The Republicans made a really big deal over what they were calling phantom jobs in the budget, which were basically unfilled jobs. They're jobs that we would like to hire people for that exist, but nobody has filled or we haven't gotten qualified applicants for. They decided that those were intentionally unfilled to create slush funds. It's a very silly notion. Ask the state police sometime if they're intentionally not filling positions. They will definitely let you know that that is not the case. So I think that sort of thing is where the cuts are going to end up being made, which I'd rather we didn't cut anything from the budget, but if we go into a shutdown that lasts for longer than 2 weeks, $400 million is about what we lose just from being in a shutdown because of the process of shutting down. So if the deal for not shutting down is that we spread those costs, then, take what we can get. But I do believe ed's going to be held intact.
The only other thing that I want to add is I want to commend you for your efforts that you've put in as a representative on behalf of Benton Harbor area schools. And I know that we're down to the wire now, but as you pursue this moving forward, I want you to know that we stand with you. And so if there are acts that you have of us to help you in your fight for our area, we're willing to do so.
Very much appreciated. Want to note that new superintendent and I got to grab coffee this week and chat, and really excited for her vision for the schools. And likewise to you guys, if anytime I can be a help, let me know. I ran on trying to help Benton Harbor Schools get back on its feet, and it's obviously really important to me. So, good luck.
I would just like to stamp what Madam President just articulated. We did have a fantastic conversation. I think it was very clear and succinct around what it was I wanted to do and my vision. So thank you for hearing me out. And it's actually very important, and I thank you for being clear about what is going to be held harmless for us in this budget, because having to think about how I'm going to feed my kids is not something I should have to think about, right? The goal of any school district is to educate, right, the whole child. And so hearing that has been very unnerving, and so it's very comforting to hear today that you feel pretty confident that that's not going to be an issue going forward. What I am curious about are some of those supporting programs. So as we seek to make sure that the classroom and instruction is able to be held, intact, I'm thinking about my MTSS programs, CTE, thinking about mindfulness programs and those kinds of things. And so I'm anxious to see where those cuts take, when you think about the budget being cut, that $400 million.
If you could, and if you have time to, if you could send over a short list to my office sometime in the next day of some of those, sorry, I know, of those programs you're keeping an eye on. I'll try to make sure that as we're getting the text of this budget, that we try to zero in and find those things, so that if there's, if there are cuts to those programs, we can try to put up a fight. We're gonna have like a really small window, but I want to make sure that if I've got some ability to fight for some stuff, I know exactly what it is I'm gunning for.
I can tell you that now. The first one, obviously, is our ELO programming. We were just approved being able to get another teacher. That's a priority of mine, because we have several families in our community that are attending surrounding districts, and it's my endeavor for our department and our district to bring those families back and be able to take advantage of our school and all of the programming that we have. So that's one major thing that I'm keeping an eye on. The second would be crime prevention. As you know, we just buried one of our students, 15 years old. Right? So when we talk about crime prevention, funding comes in the budget to support that. So that's number 2. And then number 3, obviously, just mental health for our students. When you think about the surviving siblings of that one student, that student had like 4 or 5 siblings, 2 of them in elementary, another couple in high school. We have to be able to provide trauma-informed supports for our children in schools, and not just for them, for our families. I had an opportunity to meet the grieving mother, and it's unimaginable what she has to endure. And with the school district supposedly being the lighthouse for the community, How do we ensure that the funding supports those major roles?
Yeah, I mean, to emphasize, like, kids can't learn when they're hungry. And that's why I've found it so frustrating that we were even talking about this program being on the chopping block. I mean, you want kids to learn, they got to be fed. Yeah, to your point, you got to have a safe learning environment. You got to have a healthy learning environment. If those baseline things aren't there, no one's going to learn how to read and do math because there's other things that are on their mind: food security, safety, trauma and mental health. I will note on the public safety side, I wanted to dig on that a minute because we were just talking about this before we started here. There's a lot of work being done and has been since last term on a fund for local violence prevention to create a public safety trust fund. We weren't able to get it done last term, and this term it's moved out of the House and it's in the Senate. But that's something that that I've been having a lot of conversations about, and the Senate's trying to do a little bit more with it than I think they should be. When I think we could probably just get public safety funding done. And the thing that I really like about this, for what it's worth, I know Marletta Seitz is here and she's been working on this hard, so she knows all about it too. But a lot of this funding is about prevention, and that's what I really like about what they're trying to do here. Because obviously, like, you want to stop crime before it happens. It's one thing to arrest somebody who shoots the 15-year-old. It's another thing to stop the 15-year-old from getting shot, right? So prevention, obviously, much better than just pure enforcement. But also from a dollars and cents perspective, it is so much cheaper to address the root causes of crime than it is to arrest and incarcerate and house and try and everything that goes along once that's already happened. Aside from the secondary effects, like you were just talking about, of there are, outside of the the victim himself, there are other victims in this who have to live with the outcome of this tragedy. And so I'm really hoping the Senate's going to be able to move this year. One of the things that we've been really having some conversations about with it too is the initial, and this is something, if anybody wants to advocate for something in Lansing, I would recommend. My one frustration with the setup is that it's based on crime statistics, using the amount of crime that happens in a community. Based on the state amount of crime. So, like, if a city of Detroit would get a lot of money in this because it's the largest city in the state, and thus if you take the total amount of crime in the state, of course Detroit has a higher percentage of that than, i.e., Benton Harbor, right? But if you go from a per capita basis, last year Benton Harbor had the highest violent crime per capita in the state. Now I understand it's a little better this year, which is good, but if you're thinking about actually trying to address crime where it's happening at the highest rates, using a per capita formula is much smarter than using a percentage of total state crime formula. And I've been talking with the mayor of Grand Rapids, and he feels the same, that a per capita formula makes a lot more sense. So that's the one thing I've been trying to advocate for. I tried to get them to change it in the House. They, frankly, the bill sponsors had the votes, and they were like, you can vote no if you want. And I was like, well, I'm not voting no, but I'm just saying this could be better. But that is one thing that I think we could make better. If we were able to do a per capita basis, then communities that need it would get the funding when they need it. And also, for what it's worth, there is a build-in in this to help stabilize funding too. One of the concerns when you think about a fund like this is like, okay, well, the community gets safer. Do you then lose police funding? And so the fund helps to stabilize too. So it's not just you get more funding when crime's bad and less funding when crime's good. There's some smoothing that happens in there too. But I'm really hopeful we'll get that done this year. My understanding is the money for it is in the budget, but until the bills pass the Senate, the money can't be spent. So this money is hanging there in the budget, waiting to be deployed, but the Senate's got to pass the bills. So something that folks can advocate for if they want to take some time to call some of the Democratic members of the Senate. It'd be a huge impact.
Good to know. Thank you so much.
So just a note, to house one prisoner in a level 1 in the state of Michigan is $52,000 per year. Level 2 is $42,000 per year, and a level 3 prisoner is $38,000 per year. So it's in, I think, our best interest to prevent crime, so we can use those dollars in other places. But I do want to shift to the municipal. We have our city manager of New Buffalo, Mr. Darwin Watson, I yield to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Representative Andrews, a couple of things I want to ask. Number one, you spoke about the roads and the governor's commitment to doing so. One of the biggest deltas that exist is the funding that exists for local roads versus that which exists for major roads. Has there been anything, there was some talk earlier this year about a funding, I guess, a funding revamp that would have allowed more funding to come in for local roads. Do you know any more about that?
Yeah, my understanding is that is still the case. The total amount in the road funding package is less than was anticipated. We were initially looking at a $3 to $3.5 billion package. We arrived at about a $2 billion package, but there is a larger allocation for local roads in there for cities and counties, because the counties fix the township roads, right? But there is a larger allocation. In addition, and this is a big deal, I think, especially given what we're going through right now in Berrien County on the transit side, there is a significant increase for busing. In this transit package because of how the Act 51 money is formulated. And so if we can actually get to that $2 to $3 billion funding level, we could actually be fully funding transit in the state for the first time in about 50 years. So, but yeah, we do expect a pretty significant increase in road dollars dedicated to municipalities.
The other question I have is related to constitutional and statutory revenue sharing. As a community that really operates significantly on the taxes that we bring in, state shared revenue is a significant part of, because we're not eligible for a lot of other funding sources. So could you speak to any potential cuts in constitutional and or statutory revenue sharing?
So if there is one thing that could hang this budget up tomorrow, it is that. We do not have details on the revenue sharing right now. We got a presentation from the governor's office on Thursday when we were doing the votes on roads and all that sort of stuff. And the question was asked of them, okay, we're putting more money into roads, we're putting more money into local policing, but what about revenue sharing? And they were evasive. Is how I would describe it. And so there is a concern among a number of us that we could see a cut to revenue sharing while road funding and police funding is increased, which is, in my opinion, a shell game, because what you effectively do at that point is replace unrestricted dollars with restricted dollars, which is then going to cause most municipalities to pull some of their public safety and road funding out of the restricted fund, and you're basically going to end up with not having an increase in roads and safety. So I do think if there's cuts to revenue sharing, that is going to be a huge issue for a lot of us. I'm really hoping it's not the case. I'm hoping they were just not giving us details because they don't have numbers yet. But there is a lot of concern. The MML, the Michigan Municipal League, has been reaching out to a lot of us over the weekend and expressing concern over potential revenue sharing shortfalls. So that's one that we're keeping a really close eye on, because that one's kind of a deal breaker for me personally if we're backing down on local revenue. So
Appreciate that. Thank you.
A deal maker.
deal maker.
I want to recognize our city manager, Mr. Alex Little. Do you have any questions for the representative?
Actually, you've touched on most of the points that I had concern with.
Any questions from our Personnel Finance Chairman, Commissioner Edward Isom?
First, I want to thank you, Joey, for Representative Andrews for coming and giving us an update in this town hall. With the current administration in the White House now, how much of the budget comes from federal funds versus state-generated money?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. So about half of Michigan's budget is federally funded. And that was one of our big concerns earlier this year when the continuing resolution was moving through, when they were doing the budgeting in the federal level. So Michigan has been very successful at drawing federal dollars in, and I always tried to note that because there's people that think, oh, we're getting half our money from the feds, we're on the dole. The reality is a lot of that money we're drawing in because we're matching it, right? We're a Medicaid expansion state. We matched the school meals funding that was available. We drew in a lot of economic development and housing funding. But the reality is that the reason we do that is because the feds have been generally a reliable partner for a long time, right? Like, traditionally, regardless of who controlled it, those programs were always relatively stable. This time, not so much. And so there is a lot of worry on our part, especially as the federal budget is looking at, they're looking at going into shutdown too. They're on the same schedule we are. They're on the edge of a shutdown as well. There is a lot of concern on our end about the future sustainability of a lot of these programs, and that's why I said, we're committed to doing what we can to maintain the levels as best we can, but there's only so much we can do. I mean, we can't just find $30 or $40 billion in revenue if the feds start slashing and burning programs. I'm honestly excited and somewhat surprised that we were able to hold everything intact this year. I really didn't know how we were going to hold Medicaid at $1 billion, of lost revenue. I didn't know how we were going to hold it. So we're doing our best, but every time the feds cut these programs, it trickles down. Not in the good way.
Thank you.
Are there any other from the panel, Mayor Pro Tem Seats?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Thank you again for your presentation. I think it's a wealth of information. I want to speak to Eagle. It's a concern that they're facing a $200 million cut. How does that affect us moving forward, being that we're in a deal with Eagle? Second one is with the cut with Parks Recreation. How does that affect us? And then we're doing right now a project to clean up Ox Creek. And from what I've seen on the budget, they're talking about cutting some of the cleaning up contaminated areas and different things like that. So how would that affect us locally if they start restricting that money? First was Eagle, second Park and Recreations for our state park, local parks, whatever. And lastly, the fact of cleaning up contaminated areas, being that we have the canal project that's going phenomenally. And I do thank you for your representation and what you're doing for us and the state legislature.
Yeah, so good ones to bring up. I think parks funding wise, we should be mostly fine here. Most of our parks are city parks, county parks. I think maybe we only have a couple of state parks in our area. So any cuts that get made there, and I hope a lot of that on the state level will be minimal. I don't think will impact us much here, thankfully. The other two, I think, are much bigger deals. So a lot of the issues that Eagle's having with these programs right now is the federal budget. The feds decided pretty resoundingly that they just don't like the environmental cleanup, anything that has the word sustainable or environmental, climate change, right? All those words became like bad words to them, and they just started going after all the funding streams, which is why we got hammered on the Armory project locally and the solar project. Ox Creek, from my understanding, the funding there is already distributed and secure, so I don't think we'll have to worry about that project being impacted. But I do think we have to be at least aware that future projects could be harder to obtain funding for. Which is really unfortunate because those cleanup projects end up being huge boosts. I mean, what's happening at Ox Creek right now is going to be transformative. I mean, having walking trails and, a creek like that people can just go down to and visit and interact with, maybe fish in again. That's a huge thing. We have a lot of old industrial sites around here, that need cleanup now as we kind of figure out what the next phase of life looks like for Benton Harbor and, frankly, for Berrien County. So I do have a lot of concerns about where that's coming federally. We're definitely going to keep an eye on that in the state budget too. So that's something I'll make a note to look at and make sure we're not, anything that we can maintain, we're trying to maintain on that level. And then there was one more. I'm sorry. What was the third one?
I think you covered all three,
Okay.
but if you want to add one, then you can.
Yeah, I'd like to add housing. which is a national crisis. My meeting with Congressman Heisinger, he assured me that out of the federal government, but they are struggling to pass a budget on time, that they would have a huge focus, the Trump administration, on housing, as well as Nesbitt, that housing was Senator Nesbitt, but where is where are we at with the housing in the budget?
Yeah, this is one I'm actually really going to be, like, this is a personal priority for me. Anybody who's been to one of my town halls before knows that I, pontificate at length about the housing crisis right now. MSHDA's been trying to get their programs where they need to be to adequately address this crisis for a while, and we did some good work on it last term. There's a few programs that we couldn't quite get across the finish line. The Missing Middle program was one of the biggest that needs to be restructured on the state level. And I'm not confident it's going to get restructured because it needs a legislative fix before the dollars can be allotted. And the reason is because right now the program is set up and it's targeting houses of no more than, I think it's $180,000. There are very few houses on the market for less than $180,000. You cannot build a house for less than $180,000 right now. And so we needed to expand that program, and we unfortunately had a member, we had a one-seat majority last year, for those that may have forgotten. We had one member last year who just could not get past the way that housing dollars are spent. Basically, his hang-up was that developers get the money, and no amount of, I literally sat down with him. We're friends, and I sat down with him and I was like, who builds the houses? And he was like, well, and I was like, are you gonna build the house? You got a hammer? You gonna build the house? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, developers build the houses, so we need to give developers the money, right? So they can build the houses. And he was like, well, I think, the state and the government should build more housing. And I was like, okay, but we don't currently. So anyway, so that fund didn't get fixed up like it needed to, but I am going to be paying a lot of attention to the housing dollars. I think that that's a really important, our part of the state right now is facing the housing crisis the worst. My district has 10 or 11 of the fastest increasing housing markets in the state by price. It is just getting more and more difficult to afford to live right now, and we're getting to a point where almost 50 to 60% of people's income is being spent on housing, which is not sustainable in the slightest. The recommendation is no more than 30%, and we've crossed 50%. In some places, it's higher. That's how we got into trouble in the recession. People started being able to couldn't pay their mortgages, started losing their houses. Rents got unsustainable. People end up homeless. A lot of this is, takes a local solution, and the city of Benton Harbor, I have to say, has been remarkably good on this housing issue. I talk to a lot of my communities, and I point to Benton Harbor pretty frequently, and I'm like, the way that you address the housing crisis is you say yes to housing. And every time a housing project comes up in Benton Harbor, you guys say yes. I need more of my communities to learn that. The city commissioner from St. Joe here, and St. Joe's getting better at saying yes. They're getting better. But it is something that our communities have got to get their heads around, that if you want housing prices to come down, you got to meet demand. And what I keep telling everybody is our part of our area for a long time was kind of a hidden gem. People would vacation here from Chicago, but it was still a small town. Since COVID, our area has been fully discovered. People are coming through St. Joe, Benton Harbor, but by the thousands, by the millions now. And the reality is a lot of them have the money to buy whatever they want. And so they show up and they say, well, I can't find what I want, but I'll just buy that and I'll tear it down and build what I want. And when they do that, it takes housing off the market because we're not adding housing for workers and for people who need affordable housing. And so until we build to demand, prices are going to continue to go up. Rents are going to continue to rise because the supply isn't meeting the demand. And the reality is it means our communities are going to get bigger, which I know makes some people uncomfortable because they like the charm of the smaller communities. But as I keep reminding people, our communities used to be double the size they are now. Benton Harbor used to have 18,000 residents. We're down at nine and some change. St. Joe used to have almost 15,000 residents, 7.5 right now. We can grow a lot before we cross our peaks. And if we don't build the demand and meet the demand that's coming, the people who live here now are going to get priced out. So we're doing what we can. I'm trying to push on the state level, but dollars flowing in have a counter it's counterintuitive, but if we only provide money and the housing isn't being built, it actually causes prices to go up because the dollars are subsidizing demand at that point. And so it's making it easier for people to buy an increasingly small supply or rent an increasingly small supply, which means the prices go up. So we can't keep pumping dollars in if the municipalities don't meet their part of the bargain. And again, Benton Harbor's been great at this, but I really got to emphasize that we got to work together on this housing crisis, and a lot of it starts locally. So it's my soapbox.
So I do want to recognize Commissioner Fernandez of the City of St. Joseph. And since you are in the audience, you have the first question if you like, and then I want to open it up to at large for the audience.
Representative Andrews just spoke to my main concern these days, which is, changing, what our city and, doing what our friends here in Benton Harbor do, which is say yes to a lot more housing. So thank you for, that broader explanation. I don't have any other questions, as the budget seems to be just as blind to you as it is to the rest of us at the moment.
One thing I will comment on that I think is a shared interest between St. Joe and Benton Harbor is I have been advocating for the dredging funds for the potential deepening of the harbor, and had some really good conversations about that today. Nothing's in stone yet, but I had some positive conversations about that today, and I'm almost optimistic. So, but I'm going to keep pushing on that because I think that is could be a really big boost to our local economy here.
Absolutely agree. I mean, that's huge attraction to live, work, and do stuff. That's the recreation, between both cities there. So thank you for that.
And please call your State Senator Eric Nesbitt and encourage his good office to support that dredging. So I want to open it up for the audience at large. If you have any questions, just wave your hand or just stand.
I got questions. Well, I can wait.
Representative Andrews.
Or if you want to come here, because this is on YouTube, to the microphone.
Required?
Not required.
Just speak loud.
All right, so when budgets are being decided, things like reentry kind of fall through the cracks. How is the new budget addressing reentry?
That's one of those things that I won't know until I get to see some text on the budget, but I am pretty hopeful that a lot of the programs through LEO that deal with reentry and jobs are going to be held together. But that's something we should definitely, I'll make a note to keep an eye on as the budget's moving forward, because you're right. I mean, those are the types of programs that when they're looking for dollars and cents, they go after programs like that have a pretty big impact for what we spend on them. Shoot me a text tomorrow midday, but I'm going to make a point to keep an eye on that one too.
And quick follow-up, so Medicaid was reimbursing for doula and community health worker services as well? Is that still in the new budget?
That's another thing we'll have to look at the detail on. I would assume anything that was being Medicaid funded, as long as the feds haven't changed anything, we will be Medicaid funding. So unless the feds are changing something, I would assume that we'll be holding it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Honorable Mayor. And hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Alice Adams, and I want to thank our state representative. But first of all, I want to thank our previous city manager, Darwin Watson. I don't think he ever knew that I have actually learned a lot from you. I truly have. I want to thank you, Representative Andrews, for not just coming around during election season. You have been here. I've been down here since 1999. You're the only representative of the state of Michigan that engages with people. I love that. That's the type of representation that I want, I need, and I support. I hear a lot of things that you've said, and I have a whole lot of questions, but I drive for solutions, and everything with me starts with education, and it starts with our children. Because we won't have to worry about them going to prison and paying $50-some thousand a year when we could be putting that into education. We won't have to worry about re-entry because there's nobody to be re-entering. So, that being said, we look at all type of ways of how we can save money. I don't know where this is in the form of budgeting or if in fact they even care. But we've been working with recycling and everything. I talked to a lot of people and I became a senior on dealing with other seniors that I cared for. All this paperwork that costs stamps and paper that's never read, that comes through the mail, that we drown households out with, that comes from our government. That's money that's wasted. And I don't know what we do with that today, but in the future, just something that your ears and your heart can hear of how we can stop some of it, because they don't read it, I don't. They say they don't, and it's just a waste of money, a waste of stamps, a waste of time. Some of this information is important, but we need somebody, if we can hire people within the community, like some youth, creating a job.
Commissioner Adams, could you please, with your question?
Oh, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay.
Make it and do something with it, make it work.
His time is precious. He has to get back to Lansing.
And utilize for our schools.
I want to note that I would not recommend not reading things you get from the government in the mail. It's an easy way to get in trouble.
Not all of it.
But I will say there has been some discussion starting to come up around broadly regulatory reform and reform within the agencies. And this affects everything from Eagle to MDHHS, MISHDA, all across the board. One of the things that I hear a lot from people is just the interaction with government is hard and unintelligible. And people miss out on money and programs and help all the time because they don't know it's available, they don't know how to interact with it. And somewhat unintuitively, all of these things, a lot of this on the federal level that have been done to try to crack down on quote unquote fraud, actually ends up knocking people who need the programs out, because the people who do fraud are pretty good at navigating hoops and hurdles, as it turns out, very good at it. So we've been kind of having this discussion, and it's a bipartisan discussion, which is good because it means that we actually might be able to get something done here around excuse how do we simplify permit approval processes? How do we make it easier to start a business? How do we make it easier to get, a housing voucher or health care? I think it's going to take time to figure out. As you can imagine, the agencies aren't super keen on having things reduced or, having their processes changed. They like the way they do things. But it is emerging more and more. And, we've been having this conversation on our caucus about if you want to be able to invest in programs, you need to show people that they work. And the problem right now is that I think most people don't feel like the government is working for them. They just feel frustrated. And when people feel frustrated, it's easy for somebody, like the current president, to show up and say, well, we just got to burn this thing down. And I don't think we got to burn it down, but I think we got to reform it. And I think we have to make the government work for people again and help people recognize the government works for them. Or that, we're never going to be able to make the sorts of investments, to your point, that we need to make to address poverty and education and workforce and all those sorts of things. So.
Thank you.
My question is mental health first aid. It's been brought up a couple of times. And one of the problems, I think, with our juveniles in the system is that it's not recognized. Police officers aren't trained, teachers aren't trained. You might have psychology hours, but that does not identify mental health issues. I'm actually certified in mental health first aid. I can't diagnose, but I can recognize signs. And I think that should be essential for the school system, the police department, because every child that acts out is not a criminal activity. It could be a mental health
had about 14,000 in our class. We had to have split levels. Juniors and seniors went, seniors and juniors went from 7 in the morning to 1. Other students went from 12 to 5 because there were so many students. You would have been Harvard High School, it looks like it's really pathetic. It really hurts my heart to see that because I am proud of where I am from. I'm from Benton Harbor, Michigan. My parents had grocery stores here, organization I was brought up. Nation of Islam with ice cream stores, grocery stores, gas stations. We don't have that here now. We don't have ownership. We don't have businesses where these kids can go work. We had summer programs where the youth would actually cut grasses. They would show the snow. That was something about the city. And I hope we get back to that. Hope we get back to the issue of the mental health. Because these kids have different bias disorders, they have ADHD. And a lot of teachers aren't trained for that. We need the right training for the police and for our education system.
Yeah, we boosted mental health funding last year, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be yet. And we've got a real shortage of counselors and mental health professionals in schools, especially given the need now has increased so much. It's interesting, right? You can basically see on all these graphs when the smartphone got invented, because all of a sudden mental health crises, rates of like suicide, drug use, depression, all this stuff starts increasing among young people, and it like all basically starts the minute the iPhone drops in everybody's lap. And we really haven't done anything to get our hands around this, in part because it's happened so quickly, but the need for more mental health services, for counselors, both in and out of the schools, is increasing all the time. And so that is something I think we really do need to figure out how to address. And it takes a long time to become a counselor, too. I mean, these are, master's degree positions, so we got to get kids into this pipeline quickly. Because somebody starts college today and they want to become a school counselor, school psychiatrist, they're going to spend 7 years, 8 years getting their degree before they can actually start treating kids. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to cut you off. I got a question over here, but maybe we can come back, Representative, where we can broaden the conversation beyond just the budget. But of course, without a budget, you can't do anything. So, yes.
I don't have a question. I do have a statement. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the cost of prisons. Representative, you mentioned the pipeline. What are we doing about the school to prison pipeline? When you are not on grade level, at the end of third grade, they push you on. When they push you on, they put you in special ed. Then from special ed, they push you into the juvenile system. The lack of educational resources at an early age is a serious problem that is causing a lot of the incarceration that we see on today.
I want to say we actually, myself and the superintendent, had a very good conversation about that issue in part this week, and I think there's a lot more we can do. We only had 2 years with the trifecta to start addressing some of this stuff, but increasing education funding and opportunity is a huge part of it. The third grade reading you bring up is an important part of the puzzle, and we were discussing, of all places, Mississippi has seemingly cracked a code on third grade reading by doing a combination of phonics, focused reading from an early age, holding kids back more aggressively, and doing individualized tutoring. They've managed to get their third grade reading levels up to now where they're the top in the country. Mississippi was 50th 10 years ago, and now they're top 4, both in math and reading. And not only that, but black students in Mississippi now read better than the national average and better than black students in New York, California, and I think even Massachusetts. So something that I think we can really learn from, that, you know, they're demonstrating right out of the gate. To your point, the kids can learn if we can teach them. Now we got to secure the learning environment. We talked a lot about that too, right? Kids got to be fed. We need mental health resources in the schools. We need a safe learning environment so that they can be fed. And Mary Alice, something I know you care a lot about. The parents need jobs. We need jobs because people, you know, when people are productive, they don't commit crimes. People have money, they don't commit crimes. And so I think, you know, we got to take a holistic approach to a lot of this stuff. You know, we got to help kids get good education so that they can enter the workforce, go to college, be productive. We got to make sure their parents are working. But we've got a lot of underlying problems we got to address too. You know, mental health's a big deal. The trauma that crime produces is a big deal that leads to more crime. You know, again, to your point, a lot of people who commit crimes, people aren't born criminals, generally. A lot of criminals are victims themselves. And there's something that was done to them at a young age or in their life that resulted in them, you know, making bad decisions at some point, you know, and ending up in the criminal justice system. So it's complicated, though, and I know you know that. I mean, it's, you know, if it was an easy problem to solve, we would have solved it a long time ago. But I really do think we're trying to put the systems in place, and we've got good partners on the local level that I think are thinking about this stuff. But it takes a community too. I mean, it's, you know, it's not just me, it's not just her, and, you know, the school board president. It takes a whole community looking out on this one. So, but I really do think we can. I think we can get there. I really do think we can solve it.
So I would just add that, you know, one of the things I learned at the United States Conference of Mayors was that one of the levers that a mayor can pull is to pull people in the room. And that's what we wanted to do tonight. One of my first communiques was to the Benton Harbor Area Schools Board of Education president, and not directly to the superintendent, but I figured that invite would come through the president. Then, of course, and this is from the governor's staff, that one of the things that she was going to fight for in this budget was to build on previous, as the representative said, investments in the children, and particularly with the reading and writing, and that she was going to assure that all students will be able to succeed K through 12 in order to build a brighter future. And one of the things that her administration has done is making community college free for all. And, you know, that's big because, you know, as we talked about, when we invest in education, you know, as they say, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. So I think that us being in the room, and there's not many town hall meetings tonight across the state discussing this issue. And State Representative Andrews was bold enough to step out, even though we don't have the transcript of what's being talked about behind the scenes. But when you talk about things publicly and you put issues on the table, believe me, our conversation tonight is going to get back to Lansing, starting with Representative Andrews, and I'll be giving my report as well. But thank you. That's maybe a conversation that we can have in our next town hall meeting with that at the top of it.
I know when we planned this originally, we didn't know if we were going to have a budget at all. I mean, this could have been a discussion about what a shutdown looks like, and instead it's a discussion about what a budget looks like. To double down, though, it would be remiss if I didn't mention the Reconnect program allows anybody to go back to community college at any age now for free that lives within a community college zone. So anybody living in Benton Harbor and Benton Township can go to community college for free. And I will note, and this, everybody should be really proud of this, Lake Michigan College was just rated as the top community college in the state of Michigan this year. and 13th in the country. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of community colleges, and ours is now, yeah, it was 13th, right? Was it where it landed in the country? So, I mean, we have a great resource here that people can make use of, and I don't think enough of our young people, in particular, know that they can just go back to college and it's free, and that's a huge opportunity.
And I'll just add to that point, our police chief is the head football coach at Benton Harbor High School. So we're starting with trying to educate, mentor, and teach so they can meet Coach McGinnis and don't have to meet Chief McGinnis. Thank you, Superintendent and President Robinson. So with that, if there are no burning, I do want to end on time. I have a resident here. Chief, Mrs. Love, and then we'll come to our police chief.
I'm all right. Mike, for one, I just want to say this here one thing. You have a lot of people who saying they're doing this and trying to do that for the children. You know, and the money is, you know, it's kind of getting low, and we got to work with the money. So make sure, I'm just asking you, make sure you take time out and work, get the money where the people are really doing something.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they're not doing nothing. They got names, they're talking this and they're talking that.
Yeah.
But where's the action at?
Data.
Okay? That's what I'm talking about. And also, it takes a village to raise a kid. It starts at home. We got to start working, I believe we got to start working with these parents too. Because the officers can do so much, you can do so much, I can do so much. I done worked in the school for 12 years. I'm very good at working with children. Somewhere we got to be somewhere where we can say, oh, we did it, you know? Some of us got together and say, we did something. It's time out. If you got a lot of people that study done these programs and we're not getting them, cut them. Just that quick. That's your waste of time. Thank you.
Chief McGinnis, Coach McGinnis.
Good evening, Mayor, Representative, panel, audience. I did want to kind of go back to, I know I try to be low-key, I think you forgot about me over here. I wanted to ask about the violence reduction funding that is proposed. You said it came out of the House, needs to go to the Senate. A couple of questions. One is, was the amount that originally was stated to us, for example, for us it was 439,000 some change. Benton Township was 492 and some change. Did that reduce in part of the negotiations? Is still those amounts or approximately?
I believe that is approximately the same number if they keep the current formula using the percentage of state crime instead of per capita. That would be the number. Like I said, my hope is that we can maybe get the Senate to move to a per capita funding model, at which point that number should increase significantly.
Okay, because I'd be curious to see the methodology on that. Because I know generally when crime stats are done, they're done on per capita, which actually is a lot of spuriousness in that. So that's always been my fight as far as statistics. So my second question is, and thank you for that, is this just for this year or is this perpetually moving forward?
Assuming the legislation moves through the Senate like it needs to, that would create a permanent fund. And the reason it's a trust fund is not it's not a turn of a phrase. What it basically means is the money that goes in there stays there. It's locked into that fund, and so it would be ongoing funding. Obviously, of course, a future legislature could repeal it, but they would have to repeal the act. They wouldn't just be able to defund the fund because it's a trust fund. So that money goes in and it's locked in there.
Okay, thank you very much. And last question is this. Are there any, is it earmarked for anything specific? What are the specificity of the funds, what they can go towards?
Yeah, so it's relatively broad. The goal is that it goes towards things that relate to violent crime prevention. So I think there's a restriction on like buying Army surplus materials. You can't use this funding to buy that sort of stuff. But I believe you could use it to hire officers. You can use it for equipment as it pertains to prevention, programming. If you were trying to set up some sort of in-school mentorship type of that's the sort of thing this money could be used for. So it's pretty broad based, as long as you can sort of provide a explanation that it's prevention funding.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we will take all of what was said back in my report to the Whitby administration, and of course, Representative Andrews is having breakfast with us. So he is a closer proximity than any of us down here. So I want to
Y'all are
give you
texting buddies, though. I don't get to do that,
the final statement. I will leave to the representative.
I just want to, reiterate thank you for the city for hosting this tonight and for a really great turnout in the crowd and hopefully online. I didn't ask, what we had online, but I'm hoping a lot of people were watching online. This is an unusual year. I want to emphasize that. Coming down to the deadline like this shouldn't happen very often. But community engagement like this is really important, getting to hear feedback from people, directly about what programs are important, what they'd like to see in the budget. Keep engaged with us. The thing about these budgets is we got to do another one next year. So, we're gonna wrap this one up hopefully in the next day or so. But then, 3 months from now, we're looking at the next budget. So. Even if this one isn't everything you wanted, there's another opportunity come next year, and be in touch let our office know if there's something that's important to you. The thing about these state house districts, there's only 90-something thousand people in each state house district. So when people reach out to us, I get to read the letters, I get to read the emails because it's a small population. So if there's something you really care about and you want to see, please reach out. Please let us know. Communicate with us early because we can advocate, and hope y'all stay engaged as much as possible. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you. Have a good evening.